All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to another edition of our webinar for Think Outside the Box. My name is Lizette Goodlow, and I'm the co-founder of Behind the Whistle, which is an educational consulting agency that focuses on the holistic development of coaches, educators, and student athletes. We host different conferences in the summers. This will be our third one this summer, actually, and all the people, except for Victoria, I'm sure she'll join us this year. Everyone that is on our panel today has been involved with our symposium in one way or another. But it's a way to bring people together to talk about various topics that are critical and are difficult to have sometimes with educators and coaches and student athletes. And that's really how I met my co-host, Haley Eckerman, and she and I have become really, really good friends during this process. So I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Haley Eckerman. Like Lizette said, I am currently the assistant coach at Charleston State in Stephenville, Texas. I'm a former UT volleyball player, played professionally for 5 years overseas, and I also co-founded Team Dream, which was the first all African American team to compete and win the Adult Open National Championships in 2018. So we'll start with our panel. They're going to introduce themselves, and then we'll get the ball rolling.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mari Ross. I am a sports psychologist by trade. I support about 6 teams right now in my second job. My first job is Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina.
My name is Victoria Thomas. I am the owner and CEO of Journey Fit. We are a 3-location gym in Dallas, Texas. We have a huge volleyball camp that we put on every year, and we support volleyball athletes in terms of helping them to find colleges and supporting them through the recruiting process, but then also training them as young as 8 years old, all the way up into professional.
Dr. Ivy, are you going to go or is my turn?
Your turn.
Ha! My name's Emmett Gill. I am the Chief Visionary Officer of Athletes and Advocates for Social Justice in Sports. I'm also a sports social worker. I founded the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports in 2015, and I'm also an adjunct professor at several different Division I universities.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Pat Ivy. I'm the Associate Athletics Director for Student Athlete Health and Performance here at the University of Louisville. I'm also adjunct professor at the University of Missouri and owner of Pat Ivy Performance.
Now we've had such, first I want to say thank you all for being here with us, and we've had such positive responses to our webinars that we've hosted. We've also included some calls for coaches, volleyball coaches specifically, some student athlete calls that we will be having shortly. And we felt like we needed to include everyone because football, basketball, volleyball will all be coming back. Some soccer teams will be coming back to their campuses soon, both at the high school level and at the college level. And some have already been on campus for a while. So we felt that it was necessary to bring these 4 individuals to talk to parents, talk to coaches, talk to players on how to prepare as you're re-entering a space where you haven't been in this space for months now. I've lost count of the number of days and weeks because everything's kind of run together. But we're going to go ahead and start with Dr. Mari Ross. Now, Dr. Mari, can you tell us a little bit about what you do with the teams and coaches that you work with?
So I have a couple different jobs, as I stated. So with my my teams and my coaches, I actually support their behavioral health services. I coordinate with their professional development, personal development units inside of their schools. And with coaches, it's a lot of correcting bad behavior, I would like to say. We do recruiting, so I'm a part of the recruiting process for most of the schools I work for, evaluations, and then of course, like I said, support. In my day job, my other job as a vice chancellor, I oversee all the student health and wellness for my campus. So I'm responsible for all of my students, but my heart is with my student athletes and making sure that they get what they need, because we ask a lot from them, and oftentimes we don't give them the same in return. So that's what I spend most of my days doing.
Now, Dr. Mari, what are some tips or some advice that you can give coaches as they are entering this space? Again, now, not only with the COVID situation, but with all of the social unrest that's going on. What are some tips, some advice that you can give them? Because, some of the coaches we're going to get started and then have to stop again and then start again. And it's constant unknown. So
Right.
If you would just share some info.
So the most important thing is information. Like, talk to the athletes, let them know what's going on. Even if it's nothing that's going on, say that we don't have a plan yet. We're working on the plan. If this testing thing is gonna happen, give them all the information. You can calm a lot of fears and a lot of anxiety by just sharing the information. So it's communication, it's talking early and often, it's oversharing at this point. And so a lot of my coaches want to just wait until there's a definitive plan in place. And my athletes are saying, I just need to know something. Tell me something. And so again, to manage that anxiety, really this oversharing time is important. With the racial unrest and things happening with that, I've asked my coaches to ask. Don't tell kids how they need to feel. Ask them, how are they doing? If they say they're fine, leave them alone. If they say that they're struggling, talk to them, get them to resources, making sure that they have an open format to talk about whatever's going on for them. So really, the key technique or intervention really is just about having conversations and not waiting for the kids to come and ask questions.
Now, what about student athletes as they are coming back into these spaces? Some of them have gone back to their homes, and those home environments weren't good to begin with. Right. What are some things that we can help alleviate the anxiety, number one, but also help them recover from some of the trauma that they've gone through during this time?
So, giving them coping strategies is always important. Oftentimes, though, those coping strategies were needed prior to the crisis. And so a lot of times we're behind the 8 ball on those type of things. So the schools that I support, we implement these coping strategies well before they're needed. So, for me, this is a really traumatic experience for most of our student athletes. They got ripped from their schools, ripped from their foundations, ripped from their sports a lot of times. And then, like you said, they go to homes that they try to escape. So it's really hard to treat somebody with trauma while they're in the trauma. So right now, we're just doing what we call crisis management. Checking in, making sure they're okay, making sure they have a format and a forum to express themselves. But as far as fixing anything, it's really not going to happen until we get to a more stable place. So being mindful of that. So I help my student athletes say, hey, this is huge. This is really big. You have a right to feel exactly how you feel. And it all really sucks. And that's a clinical term. It sucks. And so giving them space to feel those feelings is really what I try to give my student athletes.
Now, what about parents? Any suggestions for parents as they are some of them are sending their babies back to these environments that like you said, they could have been toxic before all of these other things happened. But now that we have added these situations, what kind of advice or what kind of suggestions do you think that you can give to parents?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, right? In collegiate athletics anyway. As much as we love our parents, we want them to be involved, sometimes we want them to not be so involved and to allow us to make some decisions and get some things done. Allow their student athletes to make some decisions as well. But what I encourage the parents is to help the athlete understand what's going to be expected of them. whether it be in this testing format or what we talked about, pre this conference, is what happens if the athlete gets sick on the road, and making sure those resources are in place ahead of time. So really understanding and advocating for their student athlete, understanding what the process is, how we're going to do this, how they're, rolling kids back onto campus, what the resources are on campus. On my campus, most of our resources are going virtual, even medicine. So making sure they understand how to access and where to access those service points is really what I want our student athletes' parents to do, and let the coaches be coaches, let the administrators be administrators, but still understand what those resources are.
And now, what about at the youth level? I know, I'm not sure, do you work with youth organizations?
I try not to. No, I love parents. So I don't do a lot of work with youth, so I wouldn't be able to speak as intelligently there. Again, knowledge is power to me. So making sure that they have all the information, but it's still allowing the folks who are experts in those roles to be experts in those roles.
Now, as the student athletes re-enter this space, and let's focus on that at the collegiate level, with the social unrest that's taking place, if they're having the conversations amongst themselves, or even with coaches as support, or people, professors on campus, and they find that maybe their head coach or athletic director or someone in those roles don't see the same things that they see, or maybe there's demands, how do you think student athletes should approach that?
So as an administrator, I probably would answer it one way. As a parent, I'd answer it another. And just being a Black woman is probably even a third way to answer that question. As an administrator, my door is always open. I want to hear from my student athletes. I want to hear from my students, period, about what's going on. I can brag on Central. We got ahead of this. As soon as we start seeing that happen, we opened these town halls for every different population we had on our campus, whether it be student athletes, women, LGBTQ, whatever population was talking, we were having town halls around those populations, and in issuing statements and saying, what can we do? And participating in what the students decided was what they needed, at the time. So, from a student perspective, I would want them to be advocates for themselves. I mean, this is a time when they're supposed to stand up for what's right and stand up for what's wrong and have a voice and use their voice. Just use it constructively, right? So I would want them to get with their SGA folks, and those SGA folks generally are ready and willing to stand in the gap for those student athletes. ADs are usually willing to listen because they have a vested interest in listening. And so making sure those ADs understand what the athletes are feeling, and making sure they're making those inroads. So, from administrator, that's what I would say. As a Black woman, I would say, get some rest, take a break. You don't have to be all things to all people. You don't have to fight this fight every day. Get off social media. It's not always your cause to carry. So rest up, walk away from it for a moment and get your bearings and understand what you really feel about it, and the history, and understand and learn what you're really fighting for. And not just be a part of a cause because the cause is happening. So I would say it from that perspective. As a mother, I have a collegiate athlete right now in my home. And I just want him to focus on his education. I know that's not the answer anybody wants to hear when it's, you're supposed to pick a side, but I just want him to be able to not have to deal with any of this. And just enjoy his sport and enjoy his education, and figure out what this new normal is going to be with COVID.
Thank you, Dr. Mari, for that information. We will have her put her information in the chat box if anybody needs to reach out to her. If at any point anybody has questions, they can submit those. And then at the end of all this, we will gather all the information out and send everyone that's signed up an email with contact information, resources, the recording, all that. So now we have one of my closest friends, and I love working with her, Victoria Thomas, who not only was our Team Dream coach, but is a successful, not only woman, but Black woman in the strength and conditioning side. And so, let's start out with Victoria. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing during COVID?
So was super fortunate to be able to push forward with my volleyball camp. It is very special and unique in that we pull volleyball players across the DFW, and we've actually had some people travel from California and Florida just to be a part of this 7-week camp where we are doing court workouts, we're doing sand training, we're doing strength and conditioning workouts. And at a point in time before the governor allowed it to happen, we didn't know if it was going to, so we kind of put it on pause. Of course, we have a spectrum of concern because of COVID. We have parents that are not as concerned. They're like, get my kid out of my house. And then we have the other side of the spectrum where it's like, what are you going to do if somebody's asymptomatic? And I'm like, do you want me to tell you that I have a cure? Because, it's just hard to kind of deal with both sides. But we ramped up all of the protocols that we could, and we were able to push forward with our camp. We got in Chiaka. We've got in some cool influential people. Kat Bell is doing a big portion of the camp. We pulled in a lot of club coaches. We weren't allowed to have any of our college coaches, of course, because of the extension of the waiting period. And that hurt me really bad at the last minute. But a really good thing that we're doing also is we're helping the players with recruiting, because that's where they're the most frantic right now. We do have the youth athletes that are trying to figure out, what can I do and what should I do in this time when it comes to recruiting. And so we've just kind of been pushing forward day by day, and our camp is 5 weeks in, and we have about 2 more left.
So how have you guys been taking kind of precautions during this time? I know a lot of, even at the college level, we're still trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. So what are some things that have been pros or cons with bringing kids back?
I think the fear about anybody who's asymptomatic is always going to be there because you would never really know. We have been doing different versions of forehead scans, of ones that are pretty accurate. There is a new cleaning system that will not allow COVID to be in the area, even if somebody's carrying it for up to 60 days. This is new, though. I don't know, how good it is, but it's its own company. It's a very deep cleaning crew. They, I guess, have some type of connection with Ecolab, or Ecolab, sorry, which is one of the world leaders in hygiene services. So, we teamed up with them, done a couple of consultations, and figured out what's the best measure to make them feel the safest. And we are doing ball cleanings every 30 minutes, so we have to break and do that. We're doing the forehead scans. We are now mandated to wear masks, and we're trying to navigate to where we're going to make the kids play with it, because that declaration came out today, where everybody in Texas has to be masked, and you can only take off your mask if you're working out outside. So, still peeling off the layers of that, but we've kind of made our own protocols and literally just done everything to make people feel safe. And we've also, there have been a lot of people that have been tested. Just, we asked anybody if you've been exposed to go ahead and get tested. And so we've been doing a lot of that.
So transitioning and getting into the swing of coming back into sports, obviously we don't want kids to jump in full force after, not having their normal weightlifting programs and doing at-home workouts. So what are some, suggestions and things that you're telling your athletes to prepare for coming back?
Because a lot of them are working out with me, and I have this spectrum, like I have girls that are going to big colleges, small colleges, and then I have pro players, and then I have going into 7th graders. So a lot of what I've been kind of counseling them on is no matter what you've been doing with me, and I've been telling this as just as a general tip, there has to be more sense of progression when you're starting, because you just can't go into Olympic lifting and some of the loads that you used to do primarily before going in, coming out of quarantine. And so I've been counseling a lot of other coaches, especially in the high school programs, because they are not some of the better coaches. You know, sometimes it's the volleyball coach and they just want, you know, they don't have a lot of knowledge and they just want some information about, you know, what should they do. And I'm speaking to them about progressive overloads and how they can make sure that they're not on the end of maxing out or doing any depth jumps right now. Really just focusing on mobility, trying to make sure that the athlete profile as they're coming in is just conditioned, because there are some things that will actually hurt the athlete just coming into lifting weights, lifting heavy weights.
So one of the things that Lizette and I were talking about earlier was bringing the mask back. How do you think that that's going to affect their performance? And if other states are having to or not having to, how that's going to play out in the college level?
Yeah, I know nobody can get through my workout with a mask, because I couldn't even when we had the altitude mask. So, you know, it is, it's one of those things to where because there is so much information about the protection and non-protection of masks, it's hard to say, you know, and make it mandatory. I know for us in Texas, we have to now. And Monday will be our first day of playing with masks on. And it's something that I know it makes other people feel comfortable. I know one of the things that has happened around the nation are there are certain people that are patrolling to make sure that you have your mask on. And so I think that one, it kind of gives you this false perception, like that's what it really does, that you're protecting yourself and that you are cognizant of others. And so I didn't even see it that way in the beginning, to be honest. Especially when I was hearing all the information about how the mask didn't necessarily prevent you from receiving COVID-19. So I think just the perception of it makes a difference. But when we're talking about in terms of playing, it is kind of tricky. I think that there are now more sports and science research behind how the mask inhibits breathing. I know that we know that from the layer of just common sense, but they're starting to dig and deep into how it inhibits the breathing of the player over time. You don't see it a lot at that point in time, but they can start developing different types of issues and other like psychological things as well. They might not have ever had, I read a study about somebody who had been working out with their mask and they had never had any breathing issues before. And then when they didn't have their mask on, they developed a type of anxiety just from having to excessively breathe into the mask. And so there are different things that are coming out. I think that eventually they're going to allow these athletes to play without their mask, and then it's going to cause an uproar because everybody's going to, you know, feel like, oh, why do we have to wear ours? But in the end, I think that I personally do not think that it's safe to wear the mask while we're performing rigorous activity.
So one more question. You obviously were our coach for Team Dream, and you understand the volleyball world of the lack of diversity, the lack of African-American girls playing. And so knowing and obviously seeing how many girls you have in your camp, with all this going on with the social injustice, what are some of the conversations that you're doing to try to help not only spread it in the volleyball world, but just in general?
It's hard. I mean, it's really, really hard. I know that it's hard for everybody, but it's really hard for me because I deal with so many parents and parents of all races. And it's just hard because sometimes we get to this point in conversation where I know that they don't understand. And then I have their kids. And my camp has 100 girls, and 50% of the girls are African American. And so it's hard because when we first opened the camp, and Kat will tell you this, I literally told them that this is the hardest camp that I've ever done, just because there was so much stress in trying to bring it about, but then also just where we were, it was just so frustrating. And I'm that type of person where I can't just ignore things. None of the girls know this, but we have a camp t-shirt every single year. Well, they know that we have a camp t-shirt, but they don't know that on next week, Wednesday, they'll get their camp t-shirt. And it has the Black Lives Matter solidarity fist. And this t-shirt is going to be given out to all of these girls. And they took a vow in the beginning when I told them that, I really feel like we're in this together. No matter how much we want to separate it, we actually need everybody in order to get back to a better space. And we prayed before we even started the camp. And I literally prayed for the covering and asking for peace, because whether people were able to admit it or not, there was an eerie feeling when we first walked in, because we started the camp 3 or 4 weeks ago. So you can imagine where we were in the middle of some of the most vile protests and just so much hurt. And I didn't want to walk into that situation not addressing the elephant in the room. So one of the things that I told the athletes is, I want you to be able to feel, and whatever you feel, I want you to be able to feel that very thing. And I want us to have conversations, because this is not going to be one of those spaces where we ignore it. I have too much responsibility as an African-American woman, as a lawyer that graduated from Howard, as a business owner. I have so much responsibility to make sure that you guys know that what's happening right now is not right, and it's going to take everybody to make it right. So I'm interested to see if there's any negative parent reactions from the t-shirt, because I think it'll expose some things, but I'm ready for all of that, because in the position that I'm in, I feel like there's only so much that I can do, but I'm going to use my voice in every space that I can.
Victoria, I think that's absolutely amazing. And we have some people on the panel that have also stood in the similar situations. And I hope that Dr. Ivy, you'll share a little bit of your experience with that as we move forward. But I think it is going to be interesting to see what those responses are once those young women receive those t-shirts. And for some parents, they may have an issue with that and may have concerns. And I know just dealing with parents at the high school level and younger, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I admire what it is that you are doing, Victoria. So continue, and we will support you however we can. It's so awesome. I look forward to meeting you in person once we get out of this situation. And we are going to move forward with one of my dear friends, Dr. Gill. He has been in our corner since we started Behind the Whistle, and it was just a crazy idea. We met with him at a restaurant one day, and he's been supportive. So thank you, Dr. Gill, for always being that rock that we've needed during this whole transition. And not only that, his son and my son are really good friends. So it's been really cool to get to know Dr. Gill and his family as well. So if you would please tell us a little bit about what it is that you've been doing during this COVID-19 time.
All right. Can you hear me okay, Lizette? Because I'm outside. I had to,
yes.
I'm always behind where I'm supposed to be. So I had to pull up on the road, and I'm just hanging out. Don't know where exactly. You know what? I'm down the street from that restaurant that we met at a little while ago. The one that we met for breakfast, they closed. I can't believe they closed. It's
really?
On Centera. Yeah, they're shut down. But darn COVID.
I know.
What have I been doing? Actually, it's been sort of ironic. I had to take some time away, sort of from sports. with all the social unrest that was going, and I really wanted to figure out my next couple of moves. So, during this time, I started Athletes and Advocates for Social Justice in Sports. I'm really excited about it. We've been monitoring what's been going on with some of the athletes who've spoken out, particularly at, Kansas State, University of Texas, Utah, Liberty, Florida State, West Virginia, all of those schools. We've been talking to those young men and young women, trying to organize them into an executive activist council. And so, when we see an athlete speaking out, part of my responsibility has been to reach out to those athletes. Other things that I've been doing, with advocates and athletes, or athletes and advocates, is, looking for funding sources. I will be moving to the East Coast in about 30 days. And in September, I will be spending a lot of time on the Hill, Capitol Hill, advocating for things like a Rooney Rule in college athletics, mental health provisions for college athletes, continued support for Title IX. So I'm excited about that. And then the last piece that I've been working on is athlete talk. Oh, you can't hear me very well. Okay, here, is that any better? A little bit better? Okay. And so the other thing that I've been doing, all right, so I'm going to the Hill. I'm gonna be working on the Hill in about a month or so, advocating for different issues like the Rooney Rule in college athletics, Title IX issues, of course, and mental health provisions for college athletes, along with name and image likeness legislation, group legislation for college athletes. And then the other piece that I've been doing is working on Athlete Talk. And I'm really excited about this app. I've been working on it for a couple of years, but basically it's a mix between YouTube and Facebook. And the app is based in different plans that athletes can do, anywhere between a 4-day plan and a 14-day plan. It's much like the Bible app. So you'll read a piece. It's based on the images that we see, the various images that we see on LinkedIn and other social media outlets. And then there are a couple of questions. And so, much like Teamworks, we will be marketing this app to different athletic departments, because the goal is simply to have athletes do some work on wellness and mental health for 2 to 6 minutes a day. It's not a long, drawn out sort of platform with different lessons, but if they can just do 2 to 6 minutes a day and get on different streaks per day, then we think that this app is going to contribute to the wellness of college athletes. I know that was a little bit long. You didn't want all that, but.
No, that's good. Now we know that student athletes are re-entering this space. What are some suggestions that you have from your perspective to give these student athletes a way to re-enter in the right frame of mind?
Yeah, and Lizette, I'll speak specifically to just sort of being away, just the mental health part, because I know that, Dr. Ivy is coming up and he can talk from a lot of different perspectives in terms of the COVID-19 and those concerns. So I'll just speak from the mental health. I'm really hoping that kids just spend some time, and I think Dr. Ross mentioned this, I think they spend some time just really trying to figure out where they stand with regard to, do I really want to return? Do I really want to compete? How do I feel about what type of shape I'm in? How do I feel about that coach who was MFing me all practice, don't look like me, and now he's going to be back and, we're going to be going through the same thing. And then I think they need to figure out how they feel about what's going on in our country. And when I say they need to figure it out, I mean getting off social media, getting away from the TV, stop talking to your friends for a little while, and having some quiet time and centering yourself. Because the thing about it, Lizette, is when these kids get back to campus, if there are others on campus, there's going to be somebody who says to them, well, that George Foreman this, or that Breonna Taylor that. And it's going to be like Biggie in the song. Wow. And it's going to be a problem. So what I'm saying is that, it's one thing for us to prepare for COVID and the second wave, and what happens is everything doesn't go right. But what about that kid on the team who might not be a white supremacist, but might be a participant in racism? what are you going to do? I mean, we just had a team at Kansas State to boycott, and now they're looking all backwards because they said they're not going to expel the kid. So to sum that up, I think the point is, if you're going to be an activist, you know, don't be a Twitter activist. You got to have a plan. And that's one of the things that I've been talking to teams and coaches about. What's your plan? You know, what are your big rocks? What are your small rocks? What are you going to fall back on when, you know, things don't go your way? What negotiating ploy do you have? Because even if we look at Missouri, where Doc Ivy was, you know, it's all about interest convergence. When you're protesting, your interests have to converge with the interests of the majority for something to happen. And if they don't, what do you do?
Now that's exactly what we've been speaking about, and I know we've been on a couple of the talks that you've had during this time. Now, if we think about the student athletes before they even get to the college level, the ones at the high school level, what are some ways that we as educators can help our student athletes deal with some of this social unrest? And some of them don't know how to be an activist. They don't even know what that means. And a lot of them are these Twitter activists, or they want to say something, but don't know how to say it. How do we help them?
Oh, that's a great question. And can you hear me? You can still hear me? Am I okay?
Yeah.
Do I need to speak?
Yes.
Okay. I think that one of the things that's been helpful for me, you know, and I'm old. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm old. Like, they call me OG now, so I'm old. But one of the things that I think about is writing. You know, if kids are trying to figure out their feelings, write it down. And I'm going to tell you how, you know, personally, you know, I've gone through some situations of racism, and it's left me with some PTSD. And I've had some people who have, I felt, done me wrong, but instead of going up and hitting them up on Twitter or emailing them, I just write. And I feel a lot better because it helps me to organize my feelings. It helps me to think through some things. And I don't have that button, you know, in front of my phone that I can just press, and it keeps me out of trouble. The other thing that I would do if I were an educator is I would just give the kids the basics of what social justice is all about. You know, understanding laws and fairness, understanding that you have to have an agenda, understanding that you have to know your allies, knowing that there are different strategies. There are petitions, there's, you know, indirect protests, there's lobbying, there's, you know, there's all these different things that you can engage in. And maybe if you select one or two and stay off your phone, then that can bring you not only a learning opportunity, but it can bring you some comfort. But I would stress drafts. If I was a high school educator or a parent, I stress the word draft. Give me a draft. I need to see a draft. Before you send anything out, we need a draft. Because the reality is that for our kids that are putting things out there, the people who can be of most detriment to them are the people that they never see. They probably don't even know. And so those are two of the things, writing and learning about social justice, that I would sort of encourage parents and folks on the high school level to do.
Now, this last question, Dr. Gill, what happens, you know, as these student athletes, and I know you're an advocate for them, what happens when these student athletes, as they're going through this social unrest, they start protesting, start making these demands on their campuses, when they graduate or when they get close to seeking employment outside, you know, once they're ready to move on, there are going to be some repercussions that are going to come their way. How do we help our student athletes understand that that's coming because they use their voice?
Yeah, well, first I suggest that they change their name. No, I'm just joking. Just get you a nice neutral name, John Smith. You know, I gotta lighten it up a little bit. But anyway, what I would say is that if they're gonna do this, Lizette, I would say that if you're gonna start it, you can't stop. It has to be something that you can present to an employer to say, you know what, this is something that sparked my interest. I may have not been refined when I first started out, but look at the things that I've done. And that's one of the things that I'm really trying to explain to high school and college athletes. If this is a one-off, it's going to make you look bad. It's really going to make you look bad. If you don't stick to the demands that you're making, it's really going to make all of us look bad. So to that person, I would say build on your portfolio. Use this as your initial sort of skinny dip into the pool of activism, but continue it in some way, shape, or form. That way, when you're in front of that employer, it's a growth process. It wasn't just, something that you did on a whim.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Gill, for the insight, the advice. And we, again, will have everyone's information. We'll have some of his groups that he talks about and talks to for young men to be a part of. We'll have all that information that we'll send out. So now we're going to transition into Dr. Ivy. Before we get there, I do want to mention that we probably will go over the 8 o'clock or the hour time limit, just because we know that with Dr. Ivy, there's some great information and knowledge that he's going to bring. So Dr. Ivy, tell us, what have you been working on with your groups and your athletes during this time?
Wow. For the last few months, obviously the COVID-19 situation. So how do we get our athletes back on campus? So my responsibility is I oversee all the sports medicine, sports nutrition, sports performance, sports science, mental health, mental performance, all of the physicians and orthos, and coordinating with our dining hall for all 650 athletes, 23 sport teams. And so that's 40 plus full-timers and over 100 plus people in health and performance, and getting all of these people on the same page to see, our core values is how do we provide the best care, communicate, and collaborate. So care, communicate, collaborate. And really in that order. We want you to care first, care about yourself, care about the person next to you, care about your person in your department, care about the coaches, care about the athletes, care about the university, care, and communicate up, down, lateral, body language, written communication, verbal communication, work on your communication, over communicate, communication, nonstop, text, email, group chats, group text, Microsoft Teams, Zoom calls, communicate. And then if you have both of those, then I believe the next progression is collaboration, because you got people that care and people that communicate. Next thing you know, you're going to be working together, doing some great things. So that's what we've been doing. We went through, we put a lot of people on furlough in the athletics department, and we had to go through that because once COVID hit, we had to anticipate what's going to be the fallout from that. So a lot of people on furlough, and then there were a lot of people that were no longer working in our athletics department. So dealing with that, there's a lot of trauma there. People that people have known for a long time and they're not around. So that was the majority of my time. And then obviously the last 5 or 6 weeks or so, the social unrest. It's really like we got 2 pandemics going on at once. And one, we're really equipped to deal with, even though it's something we've never dealt with. It's medical. We pull all of our doctors together. We pull all of our finance people together. We pull our budget. We pull the marketing people, the sports information people, all of these people we pull together. The facilities people, the people that cook, the custodians. We pull all of these. How do we keep things clean, sanitized? The doctors. When are we going to do testing? When are we going to do retesting? When are we going to do physicals? When are we going to clean equipment? When are we going to lift? When are we going to run? When are we going to eat? All of these people coming together, working together, we're really used to. We're used to doing that. That this pandemic, even though we've never been through it, we're set up and equipped to deal with it because it's very similar to things that we've dealt with in the past. And because we've addressed those issues. But this second pandemic of social injustice and racism, we are not so equipped to deal with. Black, white, brown, because we have avoided talking about it. We don't know how to deal with it. We haven't defined it. First thing people did when the coronavirus hit, people started educating themselves on what was the definition of a virus. That's the first thing people like, people, you need to understand what a virus is. So that's where people started. And then people started researching what's a pandemic. And we started getting some common information and definitions and terminology that we could use so that we could have good conversations and have good communication. Well, with this second pandemic, we don't have the definitions down. We don't understand. Did anyone look up the definition of racism? I mean, where is it? Whose definition is it? Like, who's interpreting the definition? Where is our terminology? Where are we with all of this? So we're having some conversations, but it's kind of like, who should be the person taking charge of this other pandemic? And it's kind of like, no, we all took care of it when it was COVID-19. I think we all should be taking care of it when it's this second. And so that's been interesting to navigate as we bring our athletes back to campus.
So how do you recommend student athletes and coaches mentally prepare to enter these competitive environments again?
Well, there's a lot of processes and procedures we got to get through first. Coach Victoria talked about it, what she has to deal with the athletes that she has in her care, from the 7th graders all the way to the professionals. We now have to communicate with parents. In college, we still have to communicate with parents. We have students that are at home. We have 80 plus international students. We're trying to figure out how we're working with the embassies and getting athletes. We have athletes trying to figure out if they need to go to Canada first, then come to the United States to bypass something. It's incredible figuring that out with housing. When can they move in on campus? Into what dorms? Is it off-campus housing? If they're international, can they share a bathroom? 14-day quarantine. It's a lot. Working with our mental performance, Director of Mental Performance and Mental Health, Dr. Shannon and Kate O'Brien, they're huge on the team, on our team, because they're involved in every conversation. So we're always taking into consideration the mental health of our athletes. But we also realize we couldn't just focus on our athletes' mental health. Our coaches' mental health needs just as much attention or more. We're actually finding that our athletes may be more resilient than some of our coaches. And, coaches they felt like their whole world's got turned upside down. They're focused on performance. So we're saying, hold up, we need to focus on health. We need to focus on clinical health, making sure that these athletes are safe first, and then we'll get to performance. But they're not, coaches aren't used to that. And administrators find themselves in a weird place to now have to really position themselves as the person that's making decisions over a program versus a head coach, but who's used to making most of the decisions about their program. And then there's a position like mine that gets to be the bad guy and say what we can and can't do and how fast we can do it and what's the phase in process. So mentally it's taxing on a lot of us. It's taxing on the administrators as well. It's taxing on the person who's looking at the numbers and they're trying to figure out how are we going to cut $15 million from the budget, and if that's enough. And so it's a lot going on.
So I know that you were one of the people who helped the young men at Mizzou protest in order for the university to make changes. Now that other campuses across the country are starting to take a stand, we saw Texas put out some demands. We've seen a couple other schools starting to put out some demands, Kansas State. Do you have any words of advice that you can give them?
Yeah. So first, I have to say I didn't help them protest. They didn't need anybody's help. They did it on their own. As a coach and as an administrator, I supported them. Just like the rest of our coaches and the rest of our administration, it wasn't just the Black strength coach that supported the players. It was everyone that locked arms. And I just want everybody to remember that. That's what happened. So my advice to people now is to engage in conversations now. If you haven't already done it, you need to engage in conversations. You need to, let's just take football, for instance, because that's really who's up first. Coaches need to break it down. Do you meet with the offensive team, meet with the defensive unit, meet with the tight ends, the linebackers, meet individually, meet with your Black players, meet with your in-state players, meet with your white players, meet with your seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen. I mean, keep breaking the groups down until you can extract every bit of juice from that conversation, so that you look down in the bowl, you've got the essence of and the information that you need to move forward. You can't be scared that you're gonna make mistakes and say the wrong things. Athletes are some of the most forgiving groups of people you'll ever meet. They will forgive you. You can hurt them 9 times, they'll forgive you 9 times. If it comes from your heart and you apologize and you try to do better, they are forgiving. If they see you trying to be a better coach and a better administrator and a better person, they will give you so much room to grow. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So I'm not saying it's okay to just repeatedly hurt athletes. I'm just saying I've seen athletes, they can be resilient and in these situations. So don't underestimate them. Don't underestimate what they can accomplish when they're given the right amount of support, guidance, encouragement, supervision. So I was proud of our athletes at Missouri. One of my responsibilities was I was in charge of the social responsibility programming for all of our athletes at Missouri. And we talked about the tough things. So it wasn't just about race. We also talked about LGBTQ issues. Right after that, if you all remember Michael Sam, he was one of my athletes. I was the first coach that he informed that, Coach, you know I can play. And after that, Mike went on to be the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. And the whole team, no one ever said keep it a secret. It was like, no, this is our guy. This is not our job to out him. And it was never discussed. Don't keep it a secret. That was just never. There was respect that was put forth. That was a core value in the program. And so these social issues were just a part of what we were doing. We talked about race and racism before the protest happened, because if you remember, Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri happened just a little bit before that, right up I-70. And a lot of our students were from Ferguson or from the St. Louis area. They were on our campus, and we had leaders on campus that weren't attentive, that didn't listen. And so what you had was an uprising on campus because of the leadership's inability to be empathetic and listen. And so then it spilled over into athletics. And so I would just say, before it ever gets to that point, because our athletes are going to empathize and sympathize with our students, that it happened 5 years ago. And if you don't think it's happening now in 2020, then you haven't been paying attention. Our athletes are going to sympathize. They're going to be in class with our regular students, and they're going to say, they go out there, yeah, they cheer for me because I'm going out here, I'm scoring, I'm dunking basketballs and I'm scoring touchdowns. But my person right here, my brother, my sister, gets treated in ways that are unfair and unequal. And they're going to look at that person and say, I have a responsibility. I have a platform. And it's not going to take students. The students aren't going to have to do that much convincing to our student athletes to say, do you have our backs? Because we got your backs. We're cheering for you when you go up and down that court and up and down the field. Do you have our backs when we don't have because we don't dribble a basketball, because we don't carry a football. Do you have our backs? And so, yeah, I'll stop right there.
No, I think that kind of leads into the next question of, we have a lot of coaches that are having these conversations with their team. They're feeling comfortable. How do they then approach the admin to talk about the change? You know, we're going to have a call in a couple of days with some college athletes and some coaches, and one of those conversations is, okay, how can we help you draw a plan so that you feel comfortable enough to go to the administration to say something?
Dr. Gill, we had a conversation. We've had a few conversations over the last few weeks. Wow. We're still trying to figure that out. I'm trying to figure that out. I think Coach Gill, Dr. Gill, you're still trying to figure that out. How do we get administration to understand what they need and the information that they need, and how can they engage people like people on this panel, every one of us? How can they engage us with our experiences to help them with conversations and coming up with plans? So I would, yeah, Dr. Gill.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, you know, as Dr. Ivy and I discussed this, it's a difficult, you know, sort of terrain. I think it goes back to that interest convergence. You know, I think Pat is an excellent example of, you know, a player's administrator. You know, he understands the player side, but he also understands the dollar and cent side of college sports and the politics of college sports. And so with that said, you know, you got to have somebody who understands both sides of the coin, can do all the things that he talked about in terms of communication, in terms of being empathetic. And at the end of the day, I think for our administrators, you know, understanding the social unrest, understanding the public health implications are important. But at the end of the day, we also got to sort of transfer that or flip that into dollars, cents, wins, you know, capital, whether social, political, across campus, so that they understand. So we have to be able to explain to them the implications in their language, but also be bold enough. And Dr. Ivy is one of the people who I'm incredibly confident can do this, is to sort of hold folks to the fire in terms of them being authentic and also recognizing their blind spots. If we can get some of our top officials in athletics just to recognize their blind spots, I think we'll be in a better place after this.
Well, I'd like to say thank you, Dr. Ivy. It's always awesome to have you on, to listen and learn from you. I know both my husband and myself, the Dr. Goodlow in the room, he's here. He speaks so highly of you, and we've been able to learn so much from you, not only with your talks. Hold on real quick. But if you get a chance, check out this book. It's gone through one Goodlow. I haven't gotten through yet because I am working on this dissertation right now. So I will get to that shortly, but we want to thank everyone that has joined us for these past 4 weeks. And thank you, panelists. You're family to us here in the Goodlow home. And I know, Victoria, when you come to San Antonio, you are always welcome in our home. We're sad that we're unable to have our symposium in person, but we will be virtual. So make sure that you come and check us out July 17th and 18th. That we got some awesome people that are going to talk about some really, really tough topics. And we have Dr. Gill. I know he's going to be on, and he's going to bring that fire early in the morning, and I'm sure he'll be on time for us. But we have the symposium coming up, and then on Tuesday, July 7th, we do have a student athlete call where we have student athletes that are going to actually lead some of those discussions. We met with them yesterday. They are going to engage in conversations with a lot of the student athletes from HBCUs who felt like they they could not speak up in the big call that was initially made. I think it was OU and Kansas State that put that one together. I think there were over 500 student athletes on that call. So we decided that we needed to have something else to add additionally to help our students. So that's going to be on July 7th at 7 p.m. Haley, you have anything?
Yeah, just to all the coaches that are on the call, not only are you welcome to join that student athlete call, it will be a blessing for you to be on that call. It'll be you keep quiet and you listen, which we've been saying we want our kids to be able to have this environment that they listen. We'll have adult facilitators making sure that that conversation stays safe for those students. But we also have a call on Saturday, July 11th. This will be our third or fourth call. And it is basically a safe space for coaches. So we've had a lot of volleyball coaches from the HBCUs that have kind of felt this comfortable space, but then we've also had our allies. So we've had some coaches who are white that are coaching at HBCUs and have seen some of these situations with their players and want to continue to help and want to learn how they can help their players. So we have that's July 11th at 5 p.m. That'll also be in the follow-up email. You can also go to TOT Box 20, and that's on Instagram, Twitter, and then our email is totbox20@gmail.com. And we will have that, and we'll be sharing all those information. We'll be sharing everybody's. We'd love, Victoria, if you can get a picture when you guys get your shirts, we'd love to share that. Just creating an environment to where people and coaches have this space to be able to reach out to the resources that we have. With that being said, thank you panelists for being on here with us tonight and sharing your information. And thank you everybody for supporting Think Outside the Box.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Dr. Ivy.